Hi guys, I'm Uncle Richie.
Yo, what up? JMoney's back.
And this is C10. And you're listening to the Uncle's Podcast.
G'day everyone, welcome back to the Uncle's Podcast, where we celebrate the diverse journeys and inspiring stories of Papua New Guineans living here in Brisbane. And today we have a true storyteller joining us all the way from the ABC studios here in Brisbane, Michael Chow. Now, some of us, our loyal listeners, might remember our amazing guests from a few episodes back, Melissa, as well as Jacob, who we interviewed a while back. Well, they were kind enough to connect us with Michael, knowing he'd be a perfect fit for the uncle. Michael has an incredible background in radio and music. We're talking about working with some of the global giants like Universal Music, lighting up the airways on the iconic Triple J down in Sydney, and now he's producing and hosting his very own show, Nesia Daily, right here in Brisbane. Michael, welcome to the Uncles. How are you?
Oh, thanks, Jackman. I'm feeling good. Richie over there on the tools. This is exciting. Like, I'm a fan of what you guys do. So, like, I'm kind of having a fan out moment.
We're honored to have you because
that's JMoney.
Charles obviously also connected us through you, and I know you did some stuff at the PNG Independence Day too as well, emceeing on the mic there with, I forgot the lady's name, but she was on The Bachelorette too as well.
She was. Mallory, shout outs to her, beautiful one talk who she's killing it. And it's like, as soon as I saw her name was co-emceeing, I was like, I'll do it, because I was like, she's really good. She make my life easy.
And then Charles was obviously DJing there too as well. So
great playlist. Shout out to Charles. Real gun at the wiki. That's some good stuff, man.
No, he had, at the end he was playing some PNG like throwback music, like Right Lever, some really good like bangers where I haven't had those music in a while. So, but look, we introduced a segment on the Uncle's Podcast recently. Well, it started a while ago, but it has dropped off and we brought it back, called the Uncle's Word of the Week. So we wanted to ask you with this, what is your Uncle Word of the Week? Could be good or bad, that personifies or summarizes, I guess, what your week was like. See,
this is hard because I know recently you guys had Charmaine on. Really great.
Yes.
Great artist based here in Brisbane. And she used the word that I probably would have used. I already forgotten what it was, but it was something about chilling or relaxing or take it easy. And I would have used that, but I think like the word I'll go with is perspective, just because it's got 3 syllables. People say the more syllables you use, the smarter you sound. Pro tip. But also because of what the actual word actually means, because like, as you guys have been behind the mic for quite a while, you got to bring a bit of your own perspective to something. Otherwise, anybody else could just do a podcast. I mean, 2020, everyone started a podcast. But what's your point of difference? It's the perspective you actually bring. When like I think the other week you were talking, somebody mentioned the Trukai Fun Run.
Yeah.
And I loved it because for me, as a Papua New Guinean listener, I was like, and it's funny because we actually talked about the Trukai Fun Run on our show, Nesia Daily, a while back, because we were talking to some Fijians who were doing a marathon. And then my perspective was like, Jacob, I don't know if you know this, but we had this thing called the Trukai Fun Run. I wanted one of those shirts so bad. Mufti Day came around, you pay 1 kina to wear your own clothes at school. Every kid that wore the Fun Run shirt, I just don't run. That's the problem. So I couldn't get a shirt.
I walked the Fun Run.
Nice. But yeah, perspective is important because, it's not just about what you bring, but it's just like when you're trying to understand other people in the world, you need a bit of perspective. It's easier now. You can just Google, what do Samoans like to joke about? And stuff like that. And if you have a Samoan guest coming up, you can talk to them about it. But also the fact that literally every single person has, like even literally in this room right now, we're all in the same room, but we're all literally at different positions of it. So all our perspectives are literally different in this situation right now. To literally have my perspective, Richie, you got to get out of the chair and literally be at my eye level and looking at the room from this seat. So if you want perspective on the world, you got to move figuratively, not necessarily literally. You can use the internet and you can stay in one place, but yes, perspective is my word of the week.
Wow, that is so unexpectedly great. I think usually we have like, Richard and I talk about relax or, chill, but perspective. I think it's a funny thing too as well because it changes the way you look at your day-to-day too as well. Like I feel like I was like going through a bad time at work where it was just I was just so off it. And then like that was my perspective on it. Like I just felt like, it sucks, I've got so much to do. But then when you change the perspective, be like, I should be grateful that I have a job. It's not even we're saving lives. We're literally just building ads, or doing things. But it's just like, things like that where it just changes the way you look at things. And if you want something, your perspective changes to go after it and get it. So I think, that's a really good point to start off. So thank you for sharing that. For our listeners who might not be familiar with you, can you share a little bit, like we like to start off on the Uncles podcast to get a little bit about your journey and where you're from in PNG and sort of how you came from there to be in your current position here at the ABC.
Is at that point in the movie where I stopped talking and the narration goes, "Hi, I'm Michael Chow. You're probably wondering how I got here." And literally, that's this moment right now.
That's such a great...
Well, how I got here is like, firstly, I was born in Kokopo, Eastern Britain province, lived in Rebel for a brief moment, and, there was obviously a volcano thing that happened. But we got out like a couple of years before the eruption, and we lived in Leh for most of my, until I was 15 years old. My mum's from Manus Island, well, specifically BP Island on the far western side of Manus. That is like the most furthest inhabited island of the Manus region until you get just open, uninhabited islands and open Pacific Ocean. We get trash floating to our island and we're like, man, who's throwing trash around? They're like, no, that floated from Philippines. I was like, oh yeah, the geography makes sense. Not throwing shade at Philippines. That was just an example from the top of my head. Could have come from Indonesia.
Could have come from anywhere.
But, and I love just, every Papua New Guinean is proud of where they're from. But like for me, despite Manus province, it's the smallest province in PNG probably. But we still have like 30 plus languages in the one province, which is like, again, PNG, so many languages, but just the fact that we still have that much of diversity within the one tiny, island province. But also, this is a bit of a tangent, but the fact is my island BP and our BP Islanders, that's not even our name. That's not even, if you look at our language, we don't even have B in the language. And then they're like, how did you get the name BP? It's like, well, it's literally initials, B and P. Yeah. From the Burns Philp Trading Company. So we got our identity from a European trading company. Our language is called BP because they had a plantation on the island. And there's an even further story of like, that wasn't even our island. We got forced onto that island because of reasons X, Y, Z and, colonialism and whatnot. So it's just like we lost our actual island, our actual people's name, and now our identity is wrapped around a bloody trading company. It's like, what if our island was called Coca-Cola? Yeah. I'm a Coca-Cola islander. It's like, that's colonialism bad. But it's, I'm still immensely proud of like the history we've had. And the fact that now, I've got sent to Australia against my will. My grandfather rocked up one day. My mom tried to hide me from him. My Chinese grandfather said, he's going to Australia to have a future. And I was like, cool. And my mom was like, no, don't take my baby boy. And so I ended up in Sydney for like 10 or so years, did high school. I was like doing music for a while and like just kind of fell into doing media stuff because I guess you do one sort of microphone work, you kind of stand the rest. But like, it's kind of weird. I'm just drawing the dots and I'm like, oh, how did we get there? It doesn't make a lot of sense, but I think like I was always in the right place at the right time. And not just that, it's not enough to be in the right place at the right time. It's like if lightning strikes at a certain moment and this is such a rare opportunity, were you ready for it? Like, did you actually, like I actually was working on certain skills and then it's not like I applied for a job. Literally just something came up and it's like, oh, I can do that. And that's how I ended up at Triple J. Like literally, I didn't apply to be on Australian national radio. Somebody literally sent me a Facebook message that says, do you want to come into Triple J sometime? I was like, cool, they must like my music. Turns out they didn't really listen to my music. They were just like, do you want to present here? And I was like, oh, yeah, okay. Is Play School still looking for people? I'd like to be on Play School. But like, and then just, from one thing to another, now I'm doing stuff for ABC Pacific, which is, I this is as close as to home I can get without actually physically being in home. So like, I think I was in the right place, right time a lot of times, but I was ready. Otherwise, literally someone else could have been in that moment, but it's just like, oh, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it's much harder to, anyway, I forgot what the question was.
No, just how you got there, and you were talking about being at the right place at the right time. And I think you have to also put yourself at that place at the right time. And like, it's not, sometimes it is by coincidence, but other times it's just by sheer hard work of, like, to your point, you got to know what you're doing if someone asks you to do something at that given time, which, it sounds like, even though things that align, it's not like a lot of effort and hard work sort of went into you doing your music, as well as like, finding a place that was the right time for someone to kind of come along and be like, oh, do you want this opportunity? Yeah. So that's really good. And I think you touched on a little bit there about producing your music and doing that before you started working at Triple J. How did growing up in PNG in sort of Leh, where you spent majority of your time, sort of shape your perspective and passion for music, and I guess more so storytelling?
I think I was lucky because like my mum was like hella into music. Yeah. Well, my dad was also into music, but my mum actually played instruments. That's the difference. She could play a bit of guitar, bit of keyboard. She would play like a church organ kind of thing sometimes. So like, it was easy, but also I had an uncle who, well, actually all my mum's side, I mean, just about every Manus Islander I know plays music. If anybody's heard of Highway to Paradise by Houseboy.
Yes.
But all three of them are my cousins, and all three of them are from Manus.
Bro, we're going to put this as the intro song, man.
So I'm telling you, like, as soon as that song came out, as soon as I went back to school, I was like, John Font's my cousin.
That is.
No one believes me, but John Font's my cousin. He came over to my house the other day. But like, so like having relatives that were really good at music, I mean, really good as in like national hit song good. I was like, I want to do that. Damn, why can't I do that? Like, maybe it must be in the blood. Let's do it. So, just that kind of influenced. And of course, just PNG music, man. Like, I still thoroughly enjoy listening to this stuff. Yeah, I've been in Australia for, how long now? I was in PNG for 15 straight years, and then now I'm here in Australia for like the probably the rest of my life. But like, just doesn't matter what sort of music I listen to, what sort of music I make. It's just still nice listening to old school Papua New Guinea music. Like again, you mentioned C10 was dropping some old school bangers like Junior Copex, and I was like, man, this is the stuff. I turned to my white partner. I was like, you don't know, you don't know what me and this song have been through. And just like, it's special stuff. Yeah, homegrown music.
So awesome.
Can't beat it.
No, that's amazing. And I think because it's just a nostalgia, right? Like all three of us has probably been here in Australia for quite some time, but it connects us to, like, we're so proud to be from PNG, right? And when we listen to things like that, it's just, and even though we haven't been back home to as well, like when we listen to music like that, it connects us to being back home. And we'll touch on this a little bit later around some of the questions and things you do from the Nesia Daily perspective. But I think, music's such a big thing because it's a way to kind of also listen to Tok Pisin too as well. And when they sing in Tok Pisin, and I think, like even just going to Independence Day and just listening to the music when they're playing like a song from Gulf Province where everyone's just like getting after it. I think it's just, it really kind of touches you. Yeah, it reminds you so much of being back home and, like sharing some time with your family, which, Yeah,
that's something that I can't remember, maybe I read it or somebody said it, but it's why we put on certain TV shows not to actually watch, but down in the background while we're doing like chopping carrots or whatever, is because, and when it comes to like PNG music, for me, it's like, it is hearing that language, but more so than that, I'm hearing the voice of an old friend that I grew up with at that point, and just that comfort of like, this is me catching up with an old friend. It's what a good song does.
Yeah. Wow. No, that powerful stuff. And I guess touching on sort of living here in Australia, and like, as you mentioned, you probably spend most of your life here. When you first came to Australia, were there any like, unique challenges, or I guess more so some problems that you faced early on living sort of in PNG and coming here? Because it's such a big, cultural difference, and especially at the age of 15 where a lot of your formative years would have been back home and sort of adjusting to the way of life here would have been
I
a challenge?
only just started out sending love letters to girls. When they sent me away, I was like, oh, sorry, I shouldn't say her name. We'll cut it out. Just bleep it. But like, you know, it's just like, I was just, like you said, the formative years of my life were in Papua New Guinea. And then all of a sudden, all the jokes I had, the accent I've had, everything I had didn't quite apply to specifically where I went in Sydney. I like being in Brisbane now because there's so many more. As soon as I got here, I was like, man, off a lot of Melanesians around.
Yeah.
This doesn't happen in New South Wales. But like, probably because it gets too cold once you get south of the Queensland border. It's like, turn around, everyone, let's go back up. But like, the culture shock was something, because not just that, and you guys know what it's like going to a boarding school. Going to a boarding school and literally living with all these people that I've never, like, again, I didn't get. And, you know, again, using nostalgia, they all had their own nostalgia, talking about ads I've never seen and things like that. And I was just like, how do I fit in here? Literally my first year, and it sucks to talk about like racism, but my first year in Australia was, I had to figure out how to sound more Australian just to try and, 100%. So people would stop like asking me questions that hurt. They weren't even trying to be rude. It's just like, they ask questions that hurt. And it's just like, if I sound more Australian, they'll just assume I'm from here. So like, you know, that whole thing of like Coke, you can't just say Coke or Coke. You gotta say Coke.
Yeah.
It's like having an R on the end of an O.
Yep.
Coke. And but like things like that, just trying to fit in, and that sucks. You have to give up parts of yourself just to feel like you belong somewhere else. But yeah, that was the early start, and those are kind of challenges. Yeah. And again, boarding school, so like, I didn't have any family in Sydney. And the family I did have, they didn't like me. They kicked us out of their they kicked us out of their home early on, and me and my dad were homeless for like 1 year, which was a weird thing, the fact that I was at boarding school. And yet me and my dad didn't have it. We slept in a Tongan man's garage for like a year of my high school life. And it was weird going to a fancy boarding school, which my dad didn't pay for, of course, because he broke. But my grandfather did. And it was a weird kind of situation between, and I know the family probably hates that I'm talking about this, but my Chinese family didn't necessarily like the fact that my dad went for a black woman. He was the eldest son of a very proud Chinese family, and they were all kind of disappointed in him that like he made certain choices like that. And my grandmother, she didn't acknowledge she had her first grandchild for a while, until one of my aunties literally went. And I've heard all these, I wasn't there, but I've heard all these stories already from many different sources, that literally was one auntie in particular that went to my grandma saying, my older sister, your first granddaughter is right there in the other room. You just go talk to Claire, my mom, and say hello to your own blood right there. And that was like, now like we get along like it was never an issue, but like it was like, oh, good thing I was born later. So, you know, experiencing that kind of racism within the family, being mixed race, but then experiencing in a different situation in Australia was kind of like, oh man, why? You know, it's just like not ideal, but that was probably the challenge for me. And I know there's so many other things, but it was just trying to fit in and not quite fitting in my own family. And then it was just like, oh, how do I fit in Australia? Oh crap, grandfather's sending me to a nice boarding school, but he's letting his own family be like homeless for a while. So that was a weird kind of thing, adjusting, but you know, obviously kind of things worked out in a way. It's nice being able to work at a place like ABC now, you know, and it's looking back, I'm like, oh, wasn't it weird that I lived in a Tongan man's garage for 1 year? He also stole from us. He would come in every now and then, and it was just like, it's fine. He put a roof over our heads, and we didn't have much, so it's just like, take what you like.
No, thank you so much for sharing that, and that, I guess, I definitely can see how proud you are of your PNG heritage, and I guess like for me personally to kind of go through something like that, I would be so inclined to be like, oh, I don't want like my PNG to be a big part of me because of the experiences that you go through. And I obviously didn't go to anything like that because I'm full PNG, but I think having that and kind of seeing how proud you are able to speak about both your cultures, like I'm sure you're proud of your Chinese heritage there as well. So yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. Touching on sort of the racism side of things, and I know ABC has had its own challenges with like a few, things getting published around workplace racism and harassment and stuff like that, which we won't touch base on today. But I guess I wanted to ask you from your career-wise and getting the start and proceeding to sort of get into where you are now, what are some of the challenges that you probably faced in the workplace around, like, the sort of knowledge gaps or other areas that you could touch on that you had to upskill in or sort of do extra to kind of get to where you are today?
I think the hardest thing again, I didn't apply for my first job in radio at Triple J, which is like the biggest youth broadcaster in Australia. And I was kind of in the deep end when somebody said, do you want to work here and present here? And I was like, okay. And I think... Again, I didn't realize how international I sounded until I got on the microphone and the text line started flying through. It was like, who the is this guy? Why doesn't he sound Australian? And it was just like, again, not to go into that kind of stuff, but just learning like, oh, right, there's certain expectations that an audience has, depending on your audience. That was a very staunchly Australian audience, so they had Australian expectations.
Yeah.
When an immigrant showed up and took a hardworking Australian's job, but like when I again like flash forward to now working at ABC Pacific, nobody asks those questions. If they're asking where I'm from, it's because they're genuinely like, oh wow, we really want to know like what your island's like and stuff like that. Not in the way that Australians ask, where are you from? Yeah, like it's the same words, but it comes out so differently.
So true.
And learning how my voice worked. I remember listening to the early days of my radio broadcasts. I was like, man, I'm still trying to figure out which way I want to sound. It's like, which code switch are you going to go to now? You're going to try to sound more white? Or are you going to sound right in the middle with the international thing? Or are you going to go revert to childhood and sound like whatever you sounded like as a kid? And, working out, even just, and again, you guys do this yourselves on a podcast, you start to realize what your crutches are and the fact that you're just like, how many times did I say like in that one sentence? Like. You're playing a drinking game with your audience, they'll be drunk in the first 5 seconds.
Yeah, honestly,
so, not calling anyone out, but like, that's literally my own, I just did it. I said like that's... Oh. See, now you get more self-conscious about what you say on a job like this where you're kind of held accountable because it's live radio. You can't cut things out, unless it's a pre-recorded interview, sure. But like, pretty much almost all of it is live, and it's like you start to think more about what you're saying. And again, coming to the audience, you start to understand what your audience is like. It'd be easy if it was just purely Papua New Guinean, because it's just like, that was my whole existence until 15 years old. I can speak to that thing again. Oh, Jake, have you heard of the True Guy Fun Run? But like things like that. But then now it's like, oh, we don't just broadcast to Papua New Guinea. I was listing out the countries. It's like, all right, we've got Timor-Leste, Palau, Federated States of Micronesia, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, soon to be Cook Islands. Yeah, we got Tuvalu as well, and it's like I've run out of fingers on my hand. And coming back to the whole idea of perspective, is like now I've got to expand my perspective and understand more people. Even something as simple as learning how to say hello in somebody else's language makes a big difference. We had a guest come on recently, and he said to us, because I just did an intro, what you do when you introduce your guest, and he said, the first thing he said was, this is the first Australian, and this guy's been speaking to the BBC, every other famous place. He did a massive TED Talk, everything. Proud Samoan based in Aotearoa, and he said, this is the first Australian media interview we've done where someone said my name correctly. And you feel both good and bad about that. You feel good that nailed it, but second, that sucks.
That is,
Like imagine like the most basic thing is like we're speaking to so-and-so and they can't even say so-and-so's name. And that kind of, that's how you start your interview. But like, he said, and that's the whole thing about perspective. It's like I took Samoan lessons not paid for by the ABC or anything. I literally paid for it out of my own pocket and did Zoom lessons with a Samoan I found on Instagram. I was like, can you teach me how to say these things? So like, I can be like, talo falava o lo uingo mikaile o te fia tele bisupo ma laisa. I just said the most basic Samoan greeting I could say was, hello, my name is Michael Chow, and I love rice and corned beef.
Yeah,
in Samoan. And little things like that is like, and like, I have no business learning Samoan in any other situation, but because I want to connect with the audience who I might not be physically in the country, but when you're doing like a broadcast, you're the person with them in the kitchen. You're the person sitting in the car seat with them as they're driving to work to drop off the kids. You're literally there with them. And one of the most biggest, and this is like important for anyone listening right now as well, is like, if you want to do something and really connect with someone, don't talk to your audience like it's an audience. Talk to them like, and this isn't a golden rule. It's just one thing you can think about. It's like, talk to them like there's one person that you're talking to right now sitting across from you, and because I'm sure back in the 60s, families would eat their dinner and sit around the radio and say like, let's all listen to the radio. But like, that doesn't happen now. It's usually one person by themselves in the car or one person with their earphones in while going for a jog. It's always just one person by themselves. And when you connect with one person, which is kind of feels impossible when you've got like that many countries to try and connect to, it makes a difference when they're like, oh, he's speaking to me. He just said something in my language. Oh, he just referred to that thing that I thought only Palauans knew about, and things like that. So it's just, that was one of the biggest things, is like knowing who the audience was without actually knowing them. It's just like, how do I figure out a way to connect with at least one person in a country I've never been to? That's a big one to learn, I guess.
No, thank you. And that sort of ties into my next question around, why do you think that's really important for us to, because your work at the ABC allows you to speak to, like, you listed a lot of the countries there, and there's so many different perspectives, and there's obviously cultural gaps that within, like, the work that you do, and trying to bridge that gap when you interview people. How important is it to do that? Because it goes a long way in sort of establishing rapport, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Rapport is so, like, you can have a relationship with someone, but it doesn't mean you have rapport. There's that genuine closeness with a stranger that when you ask the right question or say the right thing, all of a sudden that barrier of like, I don't know you, it just completely falls apart. Yeah. They might laugh out loud, and then all of a sudden the interview is completely different for the rest of the show, or like, the time that you have on this phone call. And like, that's always the best thing. Like, it's easy with Papua New Guinea guests because, you just whip out a little talk pisin and it's just like, oh, hey, how come the German guy speaks talk pisin? It's like, I'm not German. That actually happened on Facebook. A bunch of comments on a video that went viral. They all said, hey, this German guy speaks talk pisin. It's like, how did they think I was German? That last name is Chinese as hell. Oh my goodness. But anyway, like, it's it's sorry, what was the question again?
No, the importance of like connecting with the people that you interview through your work.
Yeah, and honestly, it's so special because a lot of these communities and like, we pick certain guests because we try not to have, maybe in the early days we'd be like, oh crap, this is the list of guests we had. They're all Samoan. And they all do the same thing. And it's just like, it's easy to fall into that. So like, consciously trying to differentiate guests is very important. But like, not just country, but gender and all kinds of different industries, walks of life. Because again, you grow up in a place like Papua New Guinea, you might think the only way to succeed is if I throw on a Kumul's jersey. That's the only way to become a success in a Papua New Guinean. And I'm generalizing, that's not for everyone, but like, that's what I thought growing up. It was like, if I want to make it really put PNG on the map and stuff, I got to play rugby league. Yeah. But then proving to Papua New Guineans and islanders from across the Pacific that like, no, hang on, check out this really cool artist. Check out this really cool chef. Check out this really cool person who does like, what was it? Some sort of like robo electronics thing. I can't even remember because like, it was an industry I've never heard of. And it's like, we got that. And also that's proof that you listening right now, you can do this too. I mean, obviously there's a lot of work involved in getting to certain places, but like, it doesn't have to just be that Kumul's jersey,
Yeah.
you know, and like shout out to the Kumul's watching the PM13.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
it was just a good time.
They did us proud. Yeah.
Yeah, always do us proud.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in Michael Maram's case, both. Some people are just that good.
I wanted to. So you touched on briefly about not. We don't need to play for the Kumals to sort of get to do good, like, to feel like we're contributing to PNG. And
Like this podcast.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I kind of wanted to ask you from your perspective, like what sort of with the work that you do, what the impact is that, in terms of representing PNG and why you think that's important in a larger platform like yours where, you're on a big scale speaking to people outside from different countries and, when they ask you where you're from, you say you're from PNG, and I guess the importance of sort of, going down that field where we touched on briefly about there's other ways that you can sort of be successful, if that makes sense.
I think, no, absolutely. I think, and this kind of, this is probably like a story that I was really, really proud of, and it made me like extra proud because I was representing PNG in a big way. Was like late last year, one of my colleagues, White, sent me a link to like this university study, and it was just like, hey, this might be of interest to you. And I looked at it. It was just a study. It wasn't like an official news thing, and it was like some researchers had found from a sample of like thousands of people listening to something, they found Tok Pisin was the most beautiful sounding language in the world. And I looked up the story and I was like, no other media outlets have talked about this. And I'm at the ABC. I'm Papua New Guinean. I want to talk about this. I want to use this platform to talk about this. And it was a story that I know certain people within the ABC were like, what's the angle? I was like, angle? They just said that a foreign place in Europe said that something about Papua New Guinea was the most beautiful thing they ever heard. Is that not a worthy of it? Anyway, so not to go into the nitty gritty of what goes on behind the scenes, but I had to really, I believed in that story and I really worked on it. It ended up being one of the most engaging stories on ABC Pacific ever since launching ABC Pacific. I went to an event just here in Brisbane, and one auntie, like shout out to Maureen Mopio Jane, she didn't even know that I made the story, but she got up on the microphone and said, did you guys just see that they thought PNG had the sexiest language in the world? I was like, go off, auntie. But like at the same time, I was like, I felt so proud. I wanted to stand up and say, I wrote that. I produced that. I did the voiceover. I called up the guy in Port Moresby who was the linguist expert at UPNG. Everything. I did all that story because, nobody else had done that story, but also like, it was a matter of pride. I was like, and I said it in the package that aired is like, they said Tok Pisin was the most beautiful language in the world. And for me, somebody associating the word beauty with PNG is probably the most beautiful thing that I've ever heard, because like the Western world doesn't always have the best stories to tell about us. No. They'll always be like, oh, this Enga province. And it's just like, we have more things going on than just tribal violence, but sure, just put us in that box.
Yeah.
So, that is important to me personally when like the selfish part of me doing a show like Nesia Daily at the ABC, which is internationally broadcast, is like, I want to make PNG, I want to tell Papua New Guinean stories or bring on Papua New Guinean people and be like, look, this is a great thing about our country that like a lot of people don't like. The fact that you go around Australia and you have to point out where Papua New Guinea is on the map to some Australians, and it's like, you can see it from the tip of Australia. You're at that tip on a clear day. You can wave to a Daru from across the way, It's just like, come on. How do you not know?
100%.
You always have to say Kokoda track, and they're like, yeah. It's just like, oh, now they know.
No, thank you. No, that's actually so amazing to hear. And touching on sort of Nesia Daily, what is it like producing and presenting on the show, and what are some of the most, I guess, rewarding and aspects of your role? And I know you touched briefly on the Tok Pisin piece that you did, but is there anything else that sort of stands out and you find that's most rewarding about your current role?
Yeah, honestly, I've said this to a bunch of work experience kids that came in recently, and it's just like, oh yeah, tell us about this thing you do. And for me, is like, again, as a kid who was born and raised in Papua New Guinea family, all that jazz, Central Australia, and being so desperate to go back home without being able to go back home. This was literally every time that mic gets turned on in the studio, I'm back home every morning, and it's my daily job. I get to go back home when I use that microphone. I sign off every show saying "Ura," that's thank you in Manus. Well, specifically BP Island. Yeah, depends which part of Manus. It's not even nobody understands what that is, but like that's my mom's native tongue. I sign off every show like that, consciously, because it's going back home, and that's so rewarding. Like, I don't know. It seems like could be a small thing that's fixed by flying back to PNG, but the fact that like, even though I'm all the way in Australia, like it feels like I never left. I've got like family who don't even hear from me at Christmas. Yeah, they're like, hey, why is he never calling us anymore? And it's like, but they get to hear my voice every day now. It's like, Auntie, just listen to the show. You get to hear me all the time. And but like, so stuff like that is special, and
that's awesome.
And it's great that the ABC has at least like started hiring Pacific Islanders. There used to be a time when they did shows focused on the Pacific, but they didn't have Pacific Island voices on the shows. It's different now, like my co-host Jacob McQuire, also Mel Macon, who you guys had as well. Like, we all, have Pacific blood, and the fact that we get to do these, it's not just about the stories you tell, it's about who gets to tell the story. This is another important thing. So that is such a rewarding part of
that's awesome. And with that, is there any memorable interviews that you've done with anyone in particular that is worthwhile kind of sharing some of the biggest takeouts that you took from that interview? Something funny or, sort of interesting you could share with us?
I don't know if you guys saw this, but it was and this is the one that some comments were trying to work out whether I was German or not, but there was a boy this is around State of Origin game one time, who painted his skin blue.
Yes.
Or the dad painted his skin blue.
Yeah. Lell Mitchell's
number one fan.
Yep.
And again, I don't know how we managed to get this story before it's funny, I was on a WhatsApp chat with the dad, and he was like, yeah, the National's writing a story about Stanley now. I was like, wow, we beat the National to the story? We didn't even get to physically be there. But like, it was just, again, similar to that Talk Piston story. It was seeing like a story come through that was like, this is cool. And like any other media outlet in Australia would have been like, so what? A kid painted his skin blue? It's like, no, you don't understand. This is PNG for starters, and rugby league is a massive thing. And Lell Mitchell has actually responded to the kid. So we ended up doing like the first ever media piece on the kid. Wow. And it was easy because PNG Facebook, they don't care about privacy.
We were just chatting about that.
I've gotten my details on Facebook. You type in the right things in Facebook, you know where I live. Don't do that, but you can. Because PNG people, they're just like very open like that. They don't realize that the internet is like a bit more wide-reaching than what it is outside of the little Facebook groups we're in. And so it was really easy to find out basically everything about the dad, and I'll just shoot my shot. I was like, hello. Very random, but I didn't know how to explain it. And I was like, can we talk to you about Stanley? And he was like, yeah, sure, I'll get Stanley on for you. I was like, cool. And, and we ended up sending him, again, ABC didn't pay for this. This was literally out of my own pocket. I actually sent him a Blues jersey after the interview, because I was like, hopefully you don't have to paint your body all the time, but
awesome.
And don't grow up too fast. I want you to wear this for as long as you want. But like, that was like such an important thing. Yes, it got like 500,000 views on Facebook, lots of reactions. I think the fact that we said that, like, we were talking about how Stanley's story reached as far as people in Germany, and that's probably why people in the comments were like, why is German guy speaking Talk Piston? Hey,
bro, that just gave me some goosebumps.
But that was a real big highlight. And again, another example of like a story that any other media outlet in Australia would have been like, so what about it? But for us Papua New Guineans, that kind of story is immense, and it's worth talking about. And again, I think the ABC were very happy with the numbers it did afterwards.
Yes.
So like the digital team were like, it's pretty good. All our pie graphs are looking good. This is like, yeah, no, that was, go on.
That is so good. It's just, yeah, like I said, giving me some goosebumps. Then on your show itself, like where can some of our listeners, because I've got the ABC Listen app that I've downloaded, and I listen, or sometimes, sorry, that's a bit of a lie, but I will get into it too as well, because some of the stuff you guys do is great. But yeah, where can some of our listeners find your show?
Yeah, if only that ABC app worked in all the regions.
That's true.
Just basically on the internet, if you go up on Google or whatever, like search engine, you just type in ABC Pacific, Nesia Daily, Nesia as in Melanesia or Polynesia, but drop the polymela. So look up Nesia Daily, and then you'll just find our show, and literally, basically, almost all the replays are up there, and even every now and then on ABC Pacific on the social media posts, like on Instagram or Facebook, they'll post stories that we've done, as well, which is great that we have both internet and radio, because multiple ways to reach people. And yeah, no, that's probably the easiest thing. Hop on Google.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I guess before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you what advice you'd give to any young Papua New Guinea PNGs, individuals that are aspiring to pursue a career in media or broadcasting.
I guess this kind of brings it full circle to the first question. Word of the week.
Yeah.
Perspective. Get perspective. If you want to live on BP Island your whole life, Manus Province, that's fine. That's valid. Do that.
Yeah.
But if you want to, do something like this or whatever, you got to have a bit more perspective than just BP Island. You got to have more perspective than just Lell Mitchell Province. You got to have a bit more perspective than Kokopo. You got to have much more perspective. And again, all it requires is moving to a different part of the room, figuratively. Use the internet. Google what people are like in the other part of the world. Know something about the people that you want to reach. Because if you want to go to the world, you got to understand the world. And you don't have to buy a plane ticket to do that anymore. You can just use your phone. You can just go to the library and read a book or something. Just get perspective. Expand your horizons. Expand what your perspective is now, and it makes it easier to talk to other people, but you can talk about other places that you haven't been to as well, and share that with people.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that, because I had a chat with my brother too as well, and growing up in sort of Tokarara, which is the suburb we grew up in, PNG, like obviously he went through a time where a lot of change happened when he was younger, and his perspective was expanding his horizon. Like he was fortunate enough that he was smart in school to kind of go through and get an education and proceed through different grades, because obviously with the PNG schooling system, I think it's changed now, but back when he was going through school, you had to pass grade 8 or grade 7 to get to grade 8, and then grade 8 to get, or grade 9 to get to grade 10 and 11 and 12. And I think with his perspective, he was so fortunate that, and he always told us if he didn't expand his horizon to sort of think beyond just Tokarara, Port Moresby, PNG, we wouldn't be here in Australia. And I think we're so grateful to have him, and things like that sort of remind us that, whatever we do in life and what we do, having that perspective of, making sure that if we want something, we just, set our mind to go and get it. It doesn't matter, with the limited resources you have. I know it's hard because some of our listeners back home in PNG, there are challenges that we all acknowledge in this room. But yeah, to your point, it's just little things like going to the library or going and sort of finding, everyone's got smartphones now. They've got access to the internet back home. And yeah, little things like that where you can use to just bit by bit, place little things that you can kind of do. And I think that's a great way to sort of end the episode today. And thank you so much for your time, Michael. Really appreciate it. Honestly, I can't express how I've just had such a good time. I was nervous about this interview, if I'm being honest, because I was I had to prepare so much, because I was to Richard and Charles, the work that you do across the ABC, obviously you've got so much experience that you do, and it Really, I felt so comfortable having a chat to you today, and thank you so much for coming to today's show.
Likewise. Feelings are mutual.
Yeah, no, thank
Big
you.
fan of what you guys do. Again, I'm looking around seeing the stickers. I'm like, oh,
Oh yeah, we should give you one.
that's you guys. You guys are the uncles. Oh crap.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.